Hello and welcome in my new tutorial series in which I'm going to explore the Redux from the scratch for the beginners. So let's get started with the scratch. So I am here in fact with the basic Create React app application. And what I'm going to do is first of all to go to install the Redux. So just go to the official documentation of Redux and then just click on the get started page. So right on here, as of now, at the time of recording this video, Redux officially recommends using Redux Toolkit. But we are going to talk about Redux Core first, in fact, before moving to the Redux Toolkit. So it's good to start with the Redux Toolkit if you already have the basic how-know of the Redux Core. But still, if you are not, if you do not know the Redux Core, so this video is perfect for you to start with. So right here from this section Redux core, I'm going to copy this command to install the Redux on my local machine. So just open up the command terminal. So this is my React application running on this. So I'm going to, in fact, open the new instance of the command terminal. So in here, just copy and paste this command npm install Redux. So what this command is going to do is this is going to install the Redux core library. So since Redux can also be used with the other frameworks like AngularJS, Vue.js, and Vanilla.js, we are purely going to use the Redux with React. So for that, we also have the official React binding for the Redux, so which is named as React Redux. So I'm going to use that as well. So in order to do that, just go to the get started page and grab the command npm install react redux. Make sure that previous command was npm install redux. That was core, and this is the React binding for the Redux. So you need to you need these two libraries, in fact, to work with Redux. So just copy this command, paste it here, and let it install it. Let it install as well. So after the installation of these two libraries, there are a few things that we need to remember, that we need to know, in fact, before jumping to the Redux itself. We do need to have we need to know the basic structure of Redux, and for that, what we have to do is I am just at the website of Redux, redux.js.org, and right on this link tutorial, what you can do is they have a very nice diagrammatic representation, an animated example of through which you can understand the architecture of the Redux quite easily. So go all the way at the bottom of the page and just in fact look at this diagram. So I'll explain this diagram because this is a very nice way to understand it. So we do have the few different parts of the Redux architecture. One, actually, we are going to have the store, and then the reducer, and then the dispatch, and then the state, and then the UI. So all these components are actually need to be built first before actually are in fact for working with the Redux. So let me start from the store. So first of all, in here we are having the basic Create React app created. So under the source folder, I'm just going to create a new folder with the name Redux. You don't have to do it. It's not mandatory. In fact, you can give it any name. Or in fact, you can create the store without even creating a folder. But this is what I usually follow. So inside the Redux directory, what I'm going to do is I have to just create a basic file with the name of store. This is the most important file, and this is the file where actually all the application states are going to reside. So inside this store, since we have already installed the Redux library, so I'm going to import the built-in function from that, which is with the name create store, and that is going to come from the Redux. So after that, so make sure when I'm going to use this create store, when I hover over it, actually it gives me the suggestion that the recommended tool is configure store method of Redux toolkit instead of using create store. So I'll definitely moving up, in fact, in one of the upcoming video. But in order to understand the React toolkit fully, you need to understand the Redux at its core. So that's why I'm intentionally using it in my very first video. I'll definitely upgrade it to the configure store in the upcoming later video. So after this, in fact, importing this create store function, what I have to do is just to, in fact, create a variable. I name it a store. You can give it any name, but better to use the name that actually reflects its purpose. So create store, which is the built-in function which I just imported above, and this actually create store function takes one argument, which is obviously necessary, and the other ones are the optional that I'll definitely be talking about a little later, and that is reducer. So you need to give a reducer as an argument to this create store function, and obviously we have to use store somewhere else, so that's why we need to export it as well so that we can use it in other files as well. So in order to in fact pass this reducer, since we did not set up the reducer, so let's go and in fact create another file, and you can give it any name, and there may be more than one reducers. So I'm just going to create a reducer with the name as counter reducer, since I'm going to give you the very basic example to understand the flow of this complete Redux app. So this is going to be a counter reducer. So counter reducer, our only reducer, is nothing but a function. And what does this function do is the reducer function takes up the existing state and returns the updated state. That's it. That's the very simple definition of reducer. So what we do is, first of all, the way I defined it, it's just a simple function. So I'm just going to give it a name like counter reducer, and that is going to be the arrow function. And in here, this function takes two parameters. As I mentioned, that it takes the existing state, and second argument, it takes the action as a second argument. So let me give the default value to the state, and let's give it a number just to make it very simple. So this is the reducer function, which takes two arguments. One is the initial state, and the other one is an action. So what we can do is we can go and write the switch statement inside it, and this action, which is the second argument of the reducer function, is actually an object. And what does this object consist of? Let me this clear this. This object can have these two properties. One is type, and the other one is payload. So you need to remember that this action object is basically like this. In fact, it does have, or it can have, these two properties, type and payload, and from where actually we will be passing the action to this particular reducer, that is the UI. So when we will actually be referring this reducer from the UI, we'll be dispatching the action, and that action would be the object consisting of these two properties. That is what I'll be coming back to it little later. So right from here, let me comment it out instead of in fact removing, because I'll be referring it over and over again. So right inside this switch, what can I do is I can just go to refer this action, and inside it there is a type property. So then, as we know from the basic programming constructs, in case of switch, we do have multiple cases. So the first case is, let's suppose I want to make an increment, and if I spell it correctly, increment, and then remember the definition that I told you about the reducer. Reducer takes in the existing state and updates the returns the updated state. So I do have existing state as 0. So let me update it. So it returns the updated state like that. State. Let's see. I am going to make the increment of 1 and return it back. So this is what actually the function of the reducer, the functionality of reducer is. It takes up the existing state, and existing state is 0 in this case, and it increments it by 1 and returns it. So if the action which is dispatched by the user from the UI is of type increment, then it is going to return the value, the updated value of the state, which is 1. And if the action type dispatched by the user from the UI is of type decrement, then we are going to have, then we are going to have the updated state, which is like state, which is the existing state or the initial state, minus equals 1. In case of decrement, like this is going to be minus equals 1. And in case neither of the actions are being dispatched by the user, then we are going to say this function a switch statement to return the default state, which is the original state, like this. So with that thing done, this is the only logic that we have to implement, that needs to be implemented into the reducer function. So after that, our reducer function is complete. The only thing that we're going to do is, since we are going to need this reducer right inside the store, so that's why we need to export it as well. So just export this to be used in the store. So now we are, in fact, we can import this reducer inside the, what's the name of it? It's a counter reducer from the counter reducer file. And then instead of this reducer, we are going to pass this counter reducer that we have just created. So what we have done is, we have created the store, we have created the reducer function. As if I refer back to this diagram, we have created this store, we have created this reducer, and we have passed this reducer inside the store. Just like this, we have passed this reducer inside this store. But remember, we did not connect our Redux logic with our React application. So if we are not going to do that, obviously our React application is not going to understand, or it's not going to recognize the logic that we have written inside the Redux directory. So let's connect our Redux with the React. So for that, what is the best place to do that is index.js, obviously, where this app component is being rendered. So here is the place where we are going to need the second package that we have just installed, which is the React Redux. So what we are going to do is, this React Redux is going to give us the component, and that is called as provider. So we have to import the provider from the React Redux. And then the second thing that we need is in here is to import the store that we have just created in the previous file. So this is the store actually that we have created, and we have exported it, and we are now importing it into the index.js file. So how do we use that? In order to provide in order to provide this store globally to our React application, all we have to do is, we have to provide the store to the app. And for that, we just have to wrap this app component with this component provided by the React Redux. So just let us do it very quickly. So we have to wrap this app component with this provider component, and that's done. And the second one is, this provider component requires one optional prop, that is with the name store. And inside this, we have to pass this store that we have created in the previous step. So that's it. We have successfully linked our Redux application with the React application, our Redux store with the React application, in fact, to be more correct and precise. So this is what we are ready to do. But wait, one more thing is left, and which is the last one. From where actually are we going to dispatch these actions, just to update the state and to simulate whether it works or not? So for that, what we have to do is, from the UI, let's talk about this. From the UI, if we follow this diagram, we are going to have a button, and when we will click on that button will actually we have the any event handler attached to it, and inside that event handler, we are going to dispatch an action like this. The action that is consist of type and payload properties. So what we are going to do is, from inside this app.js for now, and let me remove all the existing things from here. So right from here, so that we are just having like this simple hello world message. So it's not actually giving me the IntelliSense. That's probably because of this. Let me pick up this React JavaScript so that we do have that auto completion. So div, and inside div, let me write just hello to check whether it is giving me the expected output or not. Yes, this is hello. So right now we are going to design a very basic UI, just that is going to have two buttons. One is for the increment, one is for the decrement, for the little demonstration. So just let me create two buttons. Button, and let's have it a plus, and then another button which is going to have this minus sign. And on these two buttons, what I'm going to do is on click, I'm going to even attach the event handler. And what I'm going to do is, how am I now? Remember, if I don't have any local state to be updated, rather, in fact, the previous simple use state like thing, but I do have the state that resides inside the reducer and the store. So I do have, if I want to update the state, I do have to actually somehow update the state present in the reducer. So in order to do that, what I need is, in fact, React provide two hooks, basically React Redux, in fact. And those hooks are very important. So let me import those hooks to be used. So those hooks are, one is use selector, and the other one is use dispatch. So these are the two hooks actually that are made available for us by React Redux package, the official React binding of Redux. So use selector and use dispatch. These are the two hooks actually that are going to help. Use selector is going to select the piece of state from the central store, and use dispatch is the built-in hook that is going to actually help us dispatch the action to update the state in the reducer. So, right, how do I do that? I just have to copy this and just call it as a normal function and store it in a variable which you can give any name, like I'm going to give it a name like dispatch. So once I do that, now I can use this inside a callback function, and inside this dispatch, remember the shape of the action. Since I'm going to dispatch an action on click of the button, so what was the shape of the object that actually this reducer expects? The shape of the object is this object that consists of two properties, with one is type and one is the payload. So I'm just going to give the one of those properties only type for now. I'll definitely come to the other one as well. And remember that the action should match any of these actions that you have actually handled here. So I'm just copying this increment. So I'm just pasting it over here. So I'm just copying this entire piece of code from here and pasting it right over here for decrement as well. So let me copy the decrement from here in order to avoid the spelling mistakes right here. So in case we are going to click on the plus button, it is going to dispatch an action using the hook that is provided by React Redux. And then this dispatch action is going to have, in fact, going to take this object along with it, having only one property for the time being, which is type increment or type decrement. And this dispatch function is actually going to be received right over here, and this action is an object, and we have action.type property being introduced right over here. So we do have action.type property available here, and in action.type we are going to either have increment or decrement based on the action that we have dispatched from the UI. So now if we are going to do this, what next we have to do is, from how can we come to know that whether a state is being updated or not? Let's go first of all to check whether we are going to have these plus and minus buttons. So if I click plus or minus, nothing seems to happen actually for now, because we did not display the state that actually we intend to update, either increment by 1 or decrement by 1. So how are we going to, let's actually split these buttons, and inside these two buttons let's have a span tag, and inside this span tag we are going to have the value of the counter that actually we want to see whether being updated or not by the actions being dispatched by us. So how are we going to actually select this piece of state that is right here inside this state variable? How are we going to do that? For that, we do have this use selector hook that actually its purpose is to go to the Redux reducer or store and actually select the state that is in there. So how are we going to do that? Simply use selector, and this actually takes callback function. So I'm going to have this callback function, and I'm going to basically the state, that is the global state, actually is made present right over here inside the callback function of the use selector automatically. So I'm just going to grab that state as an argument to the callback function, and then just going to return that piece of state right over here. So in order to use that, I'm just going to store it into the variable, and let's call this a counter and use this counter variable right over here. So make sure that this use selector is a built-in hook that is provided by the React Redux, and its purpose is actually to go to the global Redux store and select the state and provide it into the variable of inside the callback function. So I just returned this state, and that state is present right inside here counter. So if I now go back to check the UI, and that 0 actually now is coming from the Redux store, and that is actually uh, is something we have mentioned over here. If I make it like from 0 to 10, so I should have that thing populated or updated on my UI as well. So if I now click on the plus button, it is going to dispatch an action, and that action is actually carrying the type of increment, and this type actually goes to the reducer, and reducer actually returns the updated state based on the action that was previously dispatched by the UI. So now this, if I decrement it, it is getting decremented. If I increment it, it is getting incremented. So this is what actually the complete flow that is being described in this diagram that is present in this. Whenever I click on any button on the UI, it actually dispatches an action. That action can consist of type and payload. We didn't talk about payload. That is something that we'll probably we'll talk about in the next video. And that dispatch action takes actually basically this action object, and this action object goes to the reducer, and in the reducer it takes up the existing state, which in our case is 10, and it updates the state to make it 11. And basically right now we have hard coded that increment by 1, and later on we'll show you how to actually send the payload in the action as well, and to update or to increment the number by any number that you want. So it takes up the existing state, updates it by the value 1, and then returns the updated state to the UI. So this is the entire architecture of the Redux core. I know this is the basic one. Obviously, in the next video, we'll be talking about how to send the payload and how to actually make that work too with the Redux. So I think for now, this is good enough. And stay tuned for the next lecture for the advanced Redux concept. So thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.